Okay, we're there. So it's just the two of us. So without John, but John has recorded some clips, or I think you recorded some clips creating an AI, John, and he'll appear.
I had his permission. I just want to make that clear.
Absolutely. I know you'd never do this without anybody's permission. But so if John
Never.
appears in this, it's through the magic of quantum teleportation, and he may turn up a couple times in the show. But I didn't want to postpone the show. We have done that before, where we haven't done a show. We've just taken the weekend off, and I've actually broadcast some other content. What other content could there be? But I did want to go through this because it was just such a weird week. I didn't want to miss this because there was just so much happening. What else is new? But this week was just like, I couldn't believe the things that kept coming at me, and there's still more. And mysterious things. This mysterious new thing appeared in Google Labs and then disappeared. I don't know if you'd heard about that one. It was just, I went, what?
Okay, I think I actually missed out on this one. I do pay close attention to Google Labs.
Yeah, there's a new AI, mysterious AI model appeared and then disappeared. And
nice.
Yeah, it was, I went, okay.
Cue the X-Files theme here.
Yeah. I picked up a YouTube video on it. Somebody was looking for it. And it came and appeared, but it had dials that let you designate the intensity of computation, or the intensity of the amount of time it was going to spend on something. So that was one of the controls in it. And it just looked like they were playing with stuff. But it looked like Google actually just dropped this in. Somebody went, no, that's not ready yet. And then pulled it out again, because there's been no word from them. But the reason why I brought that up is we talked about the rivalry between Gemini and ChatGPT and some of the things that they were trying to do. And we accepted the fact that at one point in this race, Gemini was full steam ahead, getting definitely.
Do you think it's really a rivalry at this point? Here's the reason I asked that question. Google has been effectively ruling the internet for 2 decades now, practically a decade and a half, certainly. And OpenAI, granted, is relatively fresh on the scene and has upended a whole bunch of things, specifically the whole search thing. And I am still waiting to see Google's AI search mode show up in Canada. It's available in the States, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not available in Canada yet, or at least it wasn't the last time I checked, which would only be a couple days ago. But I feel like OpenAI's ambitions are vastly different than Google's. Google seems to be focused on creating a place where you go for everything. Where a place you go for everything, in other words, I'm looking for information, I'm trying to do this or whatever, and I go through Google, whereas Sam Altman seems to be more interested in all your data all the time. The things that they put out this week, for instance, the OpenAI for business. In other words, remember how there was the OpenAI for countries about 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
The idea that you will run your entire country on the equivalent of a Stargate project. And just a few days ago, they put out they had a special announcement, the OpenAI for business, which was basically the same thing. It's like, we will take all of your business intelligence, all of your business documentation and whatever, processes, you name it, and we will run it from a centralized business location the same way that we're offering to run countries. It's almost, to me, OpenAI is looking to be in charge, and Google is looking to be the hub that you go to go everywhere else. I
think you're absolutely right on that, but I think the characterization of the companies is interesting. Google we've always thought of it as a disruptor. Google has proceeded like a legacy company in this. IBM used to be like this. They were slow to reinvent themselves, but they did it over time. We'd all wondered, has Google fallen behind? Maybe that's not true. Maybe they just move
I don't
at
think
a
so
pace.
at all. Yeah.
They move at their own pace. ChatGPT seems to be wanting to be the disruptor. And so they're throwing stuff against the wall as fast as you can. I can't believe how many things they're trying to innovate with. And then you've got Claude or Anthropic that seems to be the niche player. We're gonna find a niche and play that one really well. And those are the big three. There's other companies that are coming into this trying to, including Perplexity. I know you dumped it a while ago, but now that it's going to be on Samsung, Perplexity is moving in, and they've been very interesting in terms of being another niche player for the consumer market. But it's...
Now, Perplexity, to be clear, has had a way of being the default intelligence on Android phones for a little while now. Again, I'm not an Apple guy, so I can't speak from the Apple world. But in the Android world, it is possible to tell the system that when I push the magic button here, which brings up the intelligence, like at the bottom there, now Gemini comes up and it answers questions. That has been available for Perplexity for a little while now, where you could just
you could set it. But you could set one of several.
Yeah, but like ChatGPT wasn't in there. I believe it's in there now, but it wasn't in there at the beginning.
Really?
And I have to say that despite all of the different products that I have at my disposal for this kind of push-button intelligence, increasingly, I'm happier and happier with Gemini all the time, which
really
would have surprised me. Even a couple of months ago would have really surprised me. I was looking to replace it a couple of months ago, and now it's kind of, I don't know.
I'd given up because it was always telling me it couldn't do something. I found that Gemini had a lot of hallucinations. Everybody raves on about hallucinations. Unless you're a lawyer, in which case there is just everything you get is a hallucination. And I'm not sure why that works. But as I pointed out, every day I work with this, you work with this. I've spotted a couple of things that where errors have been there. And I found them with my magic Perplexity prompt, which is this true?
Oh, yeah,
I
of
wouldn't
course.
be Snopes right now because Perplexity has been the wonderful thing for conversations. If I ask it something, in terms of research, if you ask Perplexity something, it'll come back to you with reasoning on it. My favorite, is this true? Numbers kill me. So when I'm writing articles, I want to go back and check. So how big is the gross national product? How big? All of these numbers that are out there. And you'll see things written in other articles. And I do a lot of research from watching what other people have written on the internet. So I'll come back and I'll put the story together, and then I'll ask myself, did this person get it right? Forget about hallucinations. Did the person I got this from get it right? Mm-hmm. Just type into Perplexity, is this true? And it'll come back and say things quite rationally. The numbers are almost correct, but there's some nuances you should think about. And it actually answers like that. Because this person Jensen Huang may have been estimating his earnings. Those aren't the actual earnings. And so it's really quite a friendly thing. The second thing I use Perplexity for all the time is, how do I do something? I never look at help text from an application anymore.
And see, I do all of those things with Chat. I do all of those things with ChatGPT, and
you can.
And increasingly Gemini as well, because Gemini now, like ChatGPT, has the window that you can open. Like you can turn on your camera, and you can actually have it look through the camera at whatever it is you're trying to do. And I did this recently with something on my pool heater about 3 weeks ago or something like that. It's before you call the service technician, have a look at this and make sure that this cable is plugged in properly. I open it up and there's 10 cables in there. It's let me have a look. Turn on the camera. It looks at everything on the board and it says, you're looking for the cable that's in the upper right corner. And that's like amazing. That's amazing shit. And that's built into the tools. Now, I am increasingly finding that the value of this is basically even when it comes to Gemini versus ChatGPT. And perhaps I abandoned Perplexity a little bit too early, but in my defense, I was paying for a hell of a lot of different services.
Oh, no, I totally understand that. The one thing that, in terms of making this really work, I'm crazy. My wife hates it now, but I use ChatGPT at the dinner table. And not because I want to watch my phone, but because a hummingbird will come by and she'll say something like, are those the same hummingbirds as last year? Now, you can't ask Google. It can't take a decent question. You can't ask Siri because Siri is stupid. So any of the two speakers that I've got running, you can't do. So I'll tap onto to usually ChatGPT, because I actually like on the app on the iPhone, I like the chattiness of ChatGPT, and I'll say, can you tell me, are those the same hummingbirds as we had last year? And this perfectly nice, perky voice will come up and tell me everything I wanted to know. And I can keep asking it questions. I think it's a wonderful person. And if you take them to a restaurant, they don't charge to eat. Okay. But it's just, it's getting that type of answer, which flips it back to what you were talking about. Yep, this Gemini thing where you can point the camera at something and say, tell me about this. That to me would be the best next.
Well, and you can do that. And to be clear, you can do that with ChatGPT as well. ChatGPT had that available before Google did. But if you're heavily invested, this is actually one of the things that I find sad about the people who have invested in and have spent so much money on Apple products is and I told you I was reading this book, Apple in China. By the way, I want to give another plug for this book. I would never have believed how insanely riveting. Yeah. This thing is riveting. I cannot believe it. And again, I'm not an Apple fanboy. But if you're using Apple products, you're having to scaffold all these products on top, right? And if you have, and what ChatGPT has done really well, or what OpenAI has done really well, is they've made their product effectively ubiquitous so that it's on every platform, available to everybody in a whole variety of things. And then, of course, they keep rolling things out, and Sam Altman keeps being on camera to remind you that ChatGPT exists and all these different product offerings exist. And gotta hand it to him. The man is really good at that. But what something like Google does really well, okay, is it is heavily integrated, even more so as time goes on, into your Google ecosystem. So if you do use Google products, whether it's Nest Aware products or anything that works with Google or something like that, Alexa conceivably could give you that, but Alexa, of course, doesn't have the AI infrastructure that Google does. So I feel like we're getting to a point, and maybe this is a little bit of a scary thing, by the way, but I feel like we're getting into a point where you pick one. Like you and I and people like us I like to play with this. I like to learn about this one here. I like to do that. And of course, every new cool multimodal thing that comes out, doing deep fake videos of John Pinard, who isn't here with us today, but will be here in spirit, as created by me.
First of all, I have to confess that it amazes me how Marcel can be right about so many things, so much of the time. Sure, we try to keep him on the straight and narrow, but there's only so much you can do with perfection. Am I right? And yes, Jim and I do make some good points, but Marcel, what can I say?
And by the way, I did get his permission.
Of course, I'm not an AI-generated version of myself created by Marcel. Why would you suggest such a thing?
I just want to make that clear again. The thing that is happening with the development of ChatGPT being able, or OpenAI being able to do everything, and Google being able to do everything and remember everything about your life, because ChatGPT had this, but if you go into Google Gemini right now, there's something that says personalization. In other words, I can look into your Gmail, I can look into your Dropbox, I can look into your Google Drive, I can look at everything in your life. I think what they're doing is they're creating a world where you are going to pick one thing, but you will have a devil of a time walking away from it once you've picked it.
I'm following you on the pick one thing because I think they're getting to the point where that's going to be like that. I'm terrible. I kept an Android phone for the longest time. The camera finally went on it. I don't know what happened. Just at the time I wanted to try this stuff that you were talking about, pulled out the phone and now it won't work. And I'm looking at it going, am I really going to invest another $400 or $500 even on a bottom line phone? So if there's a vendor out there who wants a test of an Android phone, let me know. Because I'm not. When I was running the big publishing company, I used to get phones sent to me all the time. So that was, I never had to worry about that for a spare phone. But where was I going? There was a point.
Lock in, vendor lock in.
Oh, lock in. Yeah. Can you get you locked in? Altman, did you hear Altman's announcement? And I'm waiting for it, is they're going to put in hooks into Dropbox.
Yes, but
all of these other services.
That's the point. That's the point I'm making. Gmail, yes, yeah.
So that because the advantage I think that Gemini was running down the tracks with was, hey, we've got your email already, we've got your documents already. It's really easy. Why don't you just go with Gemini? And now Altman's come out and said, no, wait a minute, we'll let you get your Gmail, we'll get your Google Docs, we'll let you do Dropbox, let you do everything. And then taking MCP and model control protocol, right?
Yeah.
You got me on master.
Model context protocol, yeah.
Yeah. Model context protocol, yeah. So MCP, and they're going to start issuing those so you can get out to even more applications. And
yeah, you're going to plug into things like Zapier, Square, PayPal, you name it. Everything you can possibly imagine that is a service out there that there's a way to plug into. You'll be able to do it. Yeah.
And if John were here right now with his cybersecurity hat on, he'd be going nuts.
He would be aghast.
Totally wrong on this one. Sorry, dude.
They'll be running information, and somebody will be doing something to get corporate data. Snowflake is now trying to put on their big data warehouse, they're trying to put natural language programming in. You're going to have it with ChatGPT, and this stuff is going to get a bit out of control that way. But the thing that I'm more thinking about is memory. And Google wanted you to click, and they made all their money on clicks.
Yes.
There was tons of money. Now they're going to remember you. And they're going to be more in competition with Zuckerberg than anything else. And OpenAI will remember you. This scares the shit out of me now. I'm not scared of AI taking over the world. I'm scared of people who get my personal information and do everything with it.
AI taking over your life is actually one way you can take a look at it. So if you're not worried about it taking over the world, maybe you're worried about it taking over your life. I just wanted to point out that Anthropic, despite the fact that Claude doesn't have this looking through the camera thing and is trying to focus on coding, for instance, and things like this, like they want to be an answer machine that does things for you and connects to all these other services and so forth. I think they've realized that they need to differentiate themselves from Google and ChatGPT, and I think that's
a great
actually
niche.
It's
gone after programmers in a big way.
But the point I want to make is this connect to your services thing. Okay,
Yep.
If you go on to Claude, do you have a subscription to Claude?
Oh yeah.
Okay, if you go to Claude right now, you'll see that there's a connect to your apps button now. If you haven't looked at it in a week or so, yes. And it will connect to GitHub. So if you have a GitHub account and you have repositories, it will have access to all your repositories up front. It also has a connect button for Google Drive, for Gmail, and Google Calendar. Okay? So the fight to be your central everything through some kind of an AI application is well underway. And even Claude or Anthropic, who we just assumed was just going to go down the road of coding and being a good chat partner, because some people really love the personality of Claude, has now also gotten on the bandwagon where you can connect to these services by default in there. And if you want to push this one step further, you can incorporate Model Context Protocol and then bring in, like I said, everything. If you bring in Zapier, you've pretty much created a connector to the vast majority of major apps that are sitting out there on the internet at the moment. We are not so much be frightened as begin to understand what's happening and how it's going to fit in with your life, your business, and everything that's going to happen going forward. Because that integration into your life, into every aspect of your life, your business, your government, you name it, is already starting to happen. And all of the major players are in on it.
There's two ways to look at this. One is and it's more like social media, is that you don't have to be on social media. You're going to have some inconvenience. No, you're going to have some inconveniences. You won't be able to have lots of friends who don't like you or don't care about you, or you won't be able to read all those great insults that you get anytime you post something. You'll miss all of that. But you can check out from social media. And you can check out from AI as well. You don't have to put it in your life. What you can't do as a resistor is claim that it's not going to go anywhere. You've lost that battle. Anybody who sits there and goes, AI is just phony. I get them all the time, because every time we do a show and I post something on YouTube, somebody comes in and says something like, use your own brain, or something like that. And I'm going, guys, this is... whether you buy into it or not, it's unstoppable now. This is taking, when you first got PCs in the office, they were really expensive. Only a few people knew how to use them, all that sort of stuff. Several years later, they were ubiquitous. And AI's that now. It's going to be ubiquitous, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay, so I have to do a segue here into popular media for a moment here, and spent popular media a few years ago. Did you ever watch the British TV series called Humans?
I wouldn't watch any TV if I didn't know you. You always bring up these shows, and I go, I stopped watching TV in 2005.
This is how we wind down at the end of the night. You've got the kids; they're done their day. You pour yourself a glass of wine. You go sit down in front of the TV. You watch an episode and a half before you call it a night.
Or you edit a podcast for the next morning.
I know. Although I did catch you drinking wine on your porch yesterday, so
I drink wine constantly. Anybody can be sober.
You know what? We should move the show. We should move the recordings. We do the recordings on Friday mornings. We should move them to like Friday afternoons so that we can be drinking wine. Although it is 5 o'clock somewhere.
I have less editing time though. That's
okay.
I get this thing
So
for Saturday morning. Never mind.
So Humans, the TV show. Humans is based at a time where they have these. We'll call them robots, but they call them synthetics, as in they are a mix of biological material and robots and stuff like that. It's actually a brilliant series. It's a British-made series. The acting is fantastic. The visuals are fantastic. But the reason I mention it is the robots have now become ubiquitous. And of course, there is the pushback that you would expect in that world, which, by the way, we are coming into that world, and it's happening with AI. There are the enthusiasts. There are the people that are going, I'm going to ride the shockwave, man. And I'm going to take advantage of all these things that are presented to me. I'm going to take these superpowers. I'm going to make them my own. I'm going to do all sorts of funky and cool things. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. And then you've got the people we have the doomers, but we have the anti-people. So the doomers are a little bit different because the doomers recognize what's happening, but they think this could kill us all. And you know, I'll be going to admit that they have a right to be afraid on some level. I personally believe that those dangers are overblown, but I admit that they do exist. Now, the other side are the antis, and the antis or the antis, whatever you want to call them, they're not just worried about AI, they are opposed to AI. They will fight it. This is the hill they're going to die on, okay? In the show Humans, what winds up happening is there is no stopping all these machines coming into the marketplace. They are everywhere, and part of the danger is that you start having intelligent machines that can actually think independently and so forth. But there is a development of what you'd call non-technology or non-robot enclaves. So small towns will rise up where there is no AI, there are no robots working there. And I actually do wonder if this isn't going to happen in the real world, not just in the TV series, as it happened in the TV series. But imagine that there's a small town near you. Like I live in Waterloo. So outside of town, we've got Mennonites riding horses and...
Perfect comparison for this situation.
So I can envision enclaves, whether those are online or whether they are actual cities that have decided that in this town or in this city, we are no AI. We're doing things the old-fashioned way, like back in the early 2000s old-fashioned way. And we have no robots either, because the robots are going to be walking the street. Amazon is testing humanoid door-to-door delivery, as in a humanoid robot walks up to your door and delivers a package. They're testing this is happening.
We did a story on it. They built a cafe, and they are trying to train these things because of all of the nuances of real life. Yeah. And I think the humanoid robot piece of this is going to be much bigger than we possibly think, although we already have robots that are not humanoid that do amazing amounts of things.
True, but they're not staring at you in your everyday life. You can have a Roomba, okay, and there's nothing in your brain that ever says, I wonder if the Roomba is conscious. Like, you never, ever think that, because the thing just bumps into shit and eventually picks up enough stuff after it's gone over certain areas enough times.
Yeah, the dryer is conscious. The dryer is conscious. It is sending my socks into the next dimension. That's just true. But aside from that, yeah, I agree, unless we see a humanoid robot. But it's also these things of, like I said, the challenges of robotics are the mundane. And they've had these things for quite a while. Now, can you get them to actually work in the real world? And as you said, Amazon built a cafe. So these robots are going to be learning how to deal with the nuances of life so that they can, as somebody described in one of the articles, an AWS van pulls up, the robot takes your package. Actually, I'm looking forward to that because maybe they'll actually leave it at the door in the proper spot for a change instead of the idiot who left one by the garage doors, but I digress.
So I'm going to digress for a second here. I have given in to, this is the creep, by the way. This is the creep, okay? This is how the creep works. They deliver your package. Sometimes they're at the bottom of the stairs. Sometimes they're by the garage doors. Sometimes they just tossed it on your porch. It's a little bit of everything, right? And then somewhere along the way, because I'm an automation guy. I love my automation. So I automated our garage so that I have cameras in the garage, and the garage doors can open and close at my will, and I get messages letting me know that happened. And wouldn't you know it, Amazon came up with this thing called in-key delivery, which works with my smart garage doors, so that when I order something on Amazon, I can say, deliver it in my garage. And they get a one-time code that ties in to Amazon. It generates a one-time code with it's called MyQ, M-I-Q, and I'm trying to think of the name of the company that does the LiftMaster or whatever it is. Anyway, no, that's not it. But it's the company that owns LiftMaster. Anyway, I digress. The point is, they now have this one-time code. They pull up to my garage door. The garage door opens. They put the package inside. The garage door closes. The code is gone. It's a one-time code, okay? And I'm informed of it instantly. And that's a bit of a creep, because you're saying, I would love to have the robots deliver it because maybe they'll deliver it to my door for a change or something like that. Yeah, maybe they will. Just the same way that by doing this now, I know that my package is always inside my garage.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's when we started out the show this week, and we started the discussion this week, maybe that's what I was trying to say. Maybe that's a more interesting or clear way of saying it, is that this week I got the feeling that AI is being integrated into our lives now very quickly. It was something that we played with. It was something that Marcel had, something Jim played with. There were things that were out there. You had your early adopters. It is becoming more and more integrated at a speed that I find amazing. That's something. We have time to play. We make time to play, I guess. I'm getting less and less of it because of just so much going on. I admire these people who can constantly be trying something new with AI and figure out, and I don't know when I find another hour in the day to do that. But I think it's now going to become integrated. It'll just happen. And the one thing I've always wanted was an automated house that actually worked. I've tried it several times. I've tried to get the Google Home. I've tried getting other things that turn on lights and do things like that are useful. Like you, I have an automated garage door that actually has an app. But putting all that stuff together is just freaking exhausting. And I just keep waiting for like a Swiss Army knife that comes and says, you've got all these devices, let me handle it.
That's the idea behind the Matter standard. Are you familiar with Matter?
No.
Okay, so Matter is an idea, and I think it's developed by Google or through Google with a variety of other vendors. And the idea is we're going to come up with a connectivity standard for all these smart devices. So right now, if you go out and you buy a light bulb, you buy a Philips light bulb, you buy a Globe light bulb, take your favorite cheap Chinese vendor, or in the States now with 150% tariffs, whatever. There are a host of different vendors. And in fact, if you go add a device on your smartphone for your smart house, there's this list that goes on forever of different companies where you have to download their app, okay, to then connect to Google or Alexa or whatever to then be able to operate through your interface. Matter, the idea behind Matter is all of these things use a standard connectivity protocol. All of them. It doesn't matter whether it's a light bulb or a smart plug or a speaker or whatever. And it will have a little bar, a little QR code sitting on the bottom of the device. And you just hold up your phone, you scan the code, and your device is automatically configured to your house. None of these hoops that you have to jump through and so forth. And to put a little damper in the excitement of this a little tiny bit, this is rolling out now. Okay, so it's not with everything yet. And in fact, if you want to get ahead of the curve and you want to take some of that headache away, when you're going on your favorite vendor, Amazon or Best Buy or whatever, you make sure that you ask for Matter-enabled devices. And that standard, by the way, is going to be available through, as I understand it, through Apple, through Amazon, through Google, through all the Samsung, through all the major vendors, to basically get rid of that friction between connecting. Now we talked about MCP, using MCP to connect AI models to databases and to other services and to things that do the things that AI doesn't do very well, but already does really well using an external service, and then bring that in to use it. This is the same idea. It's like all of these things are useful gadgets. They're all useful devices, or at least they're useful to the people that want them. How do I bring them in without driving myself crazy? The answer is Matter.
Yeah, and I think that's the natural evolution of technology. Remember, for those who are old enough, remember we had our DOS computers, and you'd have to know all the commands and all that sort of stuff. And then we got this sort of primitive Windows thing, and now, if you don't, nobody knows how to install an app anymore. Nobody knows what they have to do. You click on it, and it happens, and that's what most people want. Same thing in if we're going to have IoT for the Internet of Things and all the devices and automated homes, they're going to need a standard like that. But it seems like that took a long time. From the first devices to coming up with something like Matter has taken a long time. The integration of AI is going to be way faster. It's already happening. And like I said, I think I can't wait now to connect, because I'm just not a Gemini guy. It just
Well, this is where I'm going with this. You don't have to be a Gemini guy. The big players, and maybe this is a little bit scary as well, because you don't have a lot of little. Actually, there are a hell of a lot of little players. In fact, one of the things I thought would be fun to discuss, maybe we probably won't get around to it today, is Jim, I bought a new PC. But
ooh. Whoa, okay.
I decided that I needed something to be able to run some larger models. No, I did not get a $4,000 NVIDIA Digit. What I got was a little mini PC, which is like about yay big.
Yeah.
It's about yay high, and it runs. It's got an AMD Ryzen 9 processor with a 780M chip, which is like about a mid-level NVIDIA chip, but it's got 24 gigabytes of GPU, dedicated GPU, and it has an NPU. It has a neural processing unit on it. So
how much?
It's actually it was cheap. It was $7.99 on Amazon.
Ooh.
Yeah,
okay,
and I'm impressed.
I just bought a Windows 11 $300 model like that.
You might want to look at this. Maybe I'll share the code with you.
Because I think that'd be great.
I've been really impressed with it, and at first I was going, oh, I don't know, man. Do I really need to spend this extra money? And the fact that I can actually do things with reasonable speed and performance this is actually pretty cool. So I digressed again here. That's going to be on my tombstone one day. But I digress.
Yep.
There are many smaller choices that you can make. But if you dream of having some kind of frictionless integration, or at least relatively frictionless integration into your life, you're probably going to have to go with one of the big players. The same way that people, like I ran, and I still run Linux, but if you wanted life to be really easy and you didn't want to make any choices whatsoever, you bought Apple, because it's like you do it our way, and everything will work because you're doing it our way. If you wanted a little bit more flexibility because you wanted to spend less money, you wanted things cheaper, you went to Windows, but they still did it all for you. If you want, we've got all the products that you need. And then you had the roll your own stuff, which was Linux based. Although Linux is in everything. For anybody out there who doesn't know, it's in your thermostat, in your television, in your car, like in your smartwatch, you name it. It's everywhere. But the idea behind going with one of the big players is it just makes that so much easier for the average person. So with that kind of integration, with an intelligence that remembers everything about your life, that will remind you of birthdays, that will go through your email, that will summarize things for you, that will do everything for you, that stuff is already out there now.
Yeah, but again, a natural evolution. We on the leading edge, where you've got your early adopters and the people who will put up with these sorts of things, we forget, and this is, I think, why companies can make mistakes in this, is if they're all run by engineers like Google, they can forget people don't buy drills. They buy holes in the wall. You don't go out to, they're the tool enthusiast who's going to go out and buy a drill. Most people have a need for a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
And the sooner they can get that done, the better off they are. So when they go to a store, they're not looking whether it's a Makita or a Shill or whatever. They just want to know price point, functions.
And will he drill a hole in my wall?
To do. Yeah, no, the stuff I need to do with it. And so I think that's what people get lost in. And I think the Apples of this world know what you want to do with the technology. The Windows of this world knows how they can give you the technology. And Google's a lot like that too. You should be happy. You wanted email, I gave you email. You wanted this, I gave you email. And it was, you can always spot this in IT when people come and they say, I gave you all this stuff, why aren't you happy? And many companies have been through this. We've invested all this money in technology. Why aren't you happy? Because I want to do this and I can't. And so I think that's, getting back to that, we can call it frictionless, but I think it's really good marketing. Being able to...
It is. And as somebody who has been in the open source community for a long time now, 35 years, I guess, at this point, I have always been a huge proponent of choice. It's like I see choice as a good thing. It's here, and unfortunately, my world of choice is here are 140 different options that you can choose from. And of course, we're there with large language models in places like Hugging Face. There are like 120,000 different models that you can try and work with and so on. But which one should I use? So for somebody like you or somebody like me who reveled in the idea that I had this massive amount of choice, that I could experiment with things, like being the shockwave writer and trying all these new technologies as they come on board, most people aren't like that. And I know if I ask my dad, it's like, what email? Just give me an email package and I'll use that and make it as simple as possible. So I gave him something that's got a unified mailbox so that he doesn't have to remember that this is my Gmail, this is my whatever mail, this is my whatever. Everything is in one place and you don't have to think about where it got there or how it got there. It's just magic. I think that a lot of people are there. And so choice, while it sounds like a really great idea, most people don't want a choice. They want a choice of maybe two things, and then they'll say, which thing should I pick? And then it gets worse than that, because then people talk about their privacy as though that's important. Is your privacy important to you? Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have to do all this stuff. How do I avoid doing all that stuff? You don't worry about your privacy. We'll take care of it for you. Fine, go ahead and do it.
Yep.
That's where we are.
Yeah. And that's where we are. But it's, again, I think the idea of integrating this and making it easier is one of those things that I think Steve Jobs was incredibly great at. I think other people, I think Sam Altman's going to be really great at it and may win that war because of it.
You're talking about bringing in Johnny Ive to create the...
designing this stuff. William Gibson, one of his first book, I still remember it because it was so much like my daughter with her first Mac. The person carried around this computer, and it was never really described in the same way we described his computer. It was almost like a sack that they carried around, and everything happened because of that. And that was the ideal future. If you don't think about it, it's just there for you. And
the first book, if you're talking about William Gibson specifically, his first book was Neuromancer. That was his first book, yeah. And that was the birth of cyberpunk.
Yeah, one of the scenes from in there was just a simple thing of a device that did everything. And I think we're moving more towards that. But I guess that's what I mean about the integration in our lives is happening, whether we care to deal with it or not, it's here. And that's going to be, that was this week where that really came home to me. And like I said, when you see Google's already integrated, Altman's got this stuff integrated. You're saying now that Claude's pretty much got these things integrated, and we will hook those to our household appliances, and we'll have all this time on our hands after that.
I'll give you an interesting example and my son is heavily into this because I'm heavily into this. So Tristan is he's heavily into this. But we were having a discussion, and I asked a question which was a fairly generic question to ChatGPT, and I don't actually remember what it was at the moment. And it said, given your son's interest in this, I can understand why you're asking this question. And it went back into earlier discussions, remembered that we had talked about these things, and brought it into context with what he was looking for. And it understood the reason why I was asking the question in the first place, and brought into context the earlier discussions to make that point. And on one hand, that's really scary, if you look at it that way. But on the other hand, for those of us who grew up watching Star Trek and these shows, it's like, that's what we've always wanted, isn't it? We wanted to ask a question and have the knowledge of the universe at our disposal, but not only that, have it understand us and reply in a way that means something to us as opposed to some generic person on the internet.
And that's why the explosion to the going from the explosion of ideas to the attempted consolidation is always a kludge. You've described matter for IoT devices. Maybe they'll get that together. Right now, we're still with a bit of a kludge. And the problem with that is if it can remember you, that's a good thing. But we've never integrated that idea of that's my data. That's me. That I should, ideally in this design, my data should be totally encrypted, released only when I say it can be released, and used only for purposes that I designate. That's not going to happen. And that gives you two problems with this. One is cybersecurity is very real. People can get in and get your information now. For you, a relatively intelligent person, you look at it and go, no, actually, I'm sorry I said that. Not relatively intelligent. Not that I'm saying you aren't. But I'm saying because people get scammed. No, because people get scammed doesn't mean they're not intelligent. It means that they just don't think that way. So now if I want to do social engineering and I can tap into your data, I will have you. I will own you. And and so it's not like we give away privacy until we get things like revenge porn, until we get things like people scamming people and taking all of their life savings. Privacy has a point, and we're not designing that into AI. And that's a flaw that is going to come back to haunt us. I'm not worried about being killed by AI. I'm worried about some old person losing their life savings because there's no security on this stuff.
I agree with you on that, and nods to John, who isn't here, who would tell me that I should be more worried about this. I believe that these are things that are being solved as we go along. Okay, so there are two different types of personal data. Actually, there's probably multiple types of personal data, but I'm going to bring it down to two. There's PII, personally identifiable information, I believe is the correct term. John, where the hell are you when we need you?
You want my opinion? I agree with Jim. I know it doesn't happen often, but Marcel is totally wrong on this one. Sorry, dude.
Nope, PII, you're correct.
Yeah, okay, PII. PII are going to be things like your social security number or social insurance number in Canada, your OHIP card, your personal information.
Any data that can be used to identify you specifically as a person, PII.
Not just identify you, but also provide access to those things that you do want to consider private, like your insurance records, the things you do when the lights are off in your bedroom. We're talking about that level of privacy, right? However, there is a whole host of other bits of information that we think of as our information. And I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but you're just not that special, and I'm just not that special. The fact is, there are things that I do that are me things that a gazillion other people do as well. They might do them at a different time of the day. They might do them in a different way. But the fact is, we all listen to music. We all go for walks. We all eat meals. What we eat is a little bit different. Those are little data points that don't matter as a whole. Do you know what I mean? So if the AI builds an image of you based on those sorts of points, okay? You like to do this. You are fond of this. You didn't like this particular show because you don't like this kind of character. It builds up that information. None of that stuff is important from the perspective of somebody stealing my identity whole hog or emptying my bank account.
It never used to be.
Or
right?
emptying my bank account.
You would say personal things about you. That's great. But you walk into a bar and they yell Norm and get you your beer. Not Norm, they yell Marcel. But
a moment of silence. A moment of silence for Norm, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. One of the greatest characters around. But the fact that somebody knows those things about you was just pleasant. That was they remembered you, and that was a
where
great
everybody
thing.
knows your name.
Everybody knows your name, yeah. But the thing about this now is, if I want to defraud you or deep fake you, knowing those things is powerful. Those things that now, if I want to socially engineer your behavior, knowing those things is very powerful. If I want to impersonate you, knowing those things is very powerful. And that's the line that we're crossing without design. I mean, so even that stuff that we think of as irrelevant or may not think of it as being personally identifiable information or the things.
So you're suggesting if I know enough things about you that aren't in that PII bucket, I can effectively recreate you to a degree where I can use that against you, is what you're saying.
Recreate me? I mean, we've discovered the same thing on social media. The simplest thing of this is I'm on vacation. Oh, that's a nice thing. That's not personally identifiable information, unless I know where your house is and I know your way and I can rob it.
Yeah. And I make a point, by the way, never to post vacation pictures until I'm back.
Me neither, until we're back. But I'm just saying that use of that information is not being thought of. And we haven't designed the system to protect us. Fraud right now is like, there was $75 billion in fraud, manipulation of people, social engineering. It's bigger than ransomware. It's bigger than anything else. 75 billion reported. Now, I'll give you a quiz. What do you think of that 75 billion is of the real amount that has actually been defrauded?
I would suspect that's a small number.
It is. It's only, the best estimates is about 15% of people report that they've been beaten by fraud.
Just like companies don't report ransom attacks.
Absolutely. Until 6 months later when they have to because something comes out. Yeah.
Because the data's been sold on the black on the black web, on the dark web rather. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, they never really look at it and say, we're supposed to report that. We should report that. Are you absolutely? And I actually went through this with a whistleblower. Their boss didn't say you shouldn't report it. They never say that. They say, are you absolutely sure?
So funny story.
You tell the truth. You tell the truth, Marcel. I'm not stopping you from telling the truth, but corporations are just beautiful for this, to bend behavior. But are you absolutely certain? Because there are consequences, not for us, but for other people up there who they'll be upset if you're wrong.
Yeah, that's a nice house. You've got to be ashamed if you lost it.
Yeah, it's corporate mind bend mafia. But so anyway, these are the things that we're going to experience. And it's like doing this on fast forward. And part of the thing of being around for 40 years or having a career this long in technology is you've seen it in slow motion. And now it's happening.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of those things that I come back to on a regular basis. It's not that fraud hasn't existed and that people being conned hasn't existed for basically eternity, for as long as there's been, as long as we've had anything resembling a social system.
Jack comes back, he's traded the cow for 3 beans.
Exactly. But what is different now, and even things like deepfakes have existed for years beyond the technology that we've got now. What the real danger now is we can do it at scale, and we can do it. Yeah. And now we don't need a well-heeled con man who's been working at this for decades to create the perfect deep fake or something like that. Some schmuck in their backyard can do it, like anybody can do it. In fact, I know you're going to insert pieces of AI John into the video for the people who are watching.
First of all, I have to confess that it amazes me how Marcel can be right about so many things, so much of the time. Sure, we try to keep him on the straight and narrow, but there's only so much you can do with perfection. Am I right? And yes, Jim and I do make some good points, but Marcel, what can I say?
I made those things this morning. Like I did not spend a humongous amount of time. I took a screenshot of John from our last podcast and I created an AI version of John using his image and animating his image. I took his voice from last week, again, with John's... In fact, John is the one who suggested I do this. And it's pretty damn convincing.
Of course, I'm not an AI-generated version of myself created by Marcel. Why would you suggest such a thing?
It really is. And so now we can do these things at scale. But I find myself wondering, and I do this regularly, I ask myself this regularly, is this in a way kind of a good thing? Like I know it's weird, but is it a good thing in the sense that for once now, we are entering a world where you don't just assume that this is real. And it's bad in one way because it causes us to question everything, but it's good in another way because it causes us to question everything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, oh yeah. But the problem is people don't question anything.
But they're going to have to, because if they're faced with it constantly, it's got to be in your mind all the time.
We are faced with it constantly. And we have this, we've divided into tribes with confirmation bias. We don't believe anything that happens outside our silo. And now we've gone from the fraudulent to the social implications of this. We're entering a world where truth is a concept, and we have no objective way of verifying it. Even with deep fakes and the arms race that's going in deep fakes right now. 2 weeks ago, I'm listening to CBC Radio with the quirks and quarks, and this scientist is patiently explaining how they found a way to beat deep fakes because everybody has a heartbeat and they can study that. So even taking a video like us, they can come and say, that's a real person because I can
see the blood coursing through their veins.
3 weeks later, the announcement comes out that somebody's beat that and has incorporated that into deep fakes.
Yeah, and I still hear people saying things. I can tell it's an AI image because of the number of fingers. Have you seen an AI image lately? Because they solved that problem quite a while back.
Yeah. And do you look that closely, really?
No, we don't. Are you familiar with World ID?
Is that that's not the Altman thing?
It is. It's the Altman thing. It's a company. It's this thing, the
scanning the retina.
Yeah, the scanning the retina thing. And I'm not sure how I feel about the implementation, the fact that it's Sam Altman who's behind this thing and he wants to rule the world. But World ID, the idea of World ID, it sounds just weird, is that we will have a way to identify that a person is real, because you will have a fully encrypted shared key that is associated with everything that you do on the internet, everything that you say, every video that you're in, every conversation that you've got. Someone is going to be able to not break into your thing, but look at your identifier and say, yes, that is actually the real Jim Love who is out there, because Jim went and scanned his iris into this thing, or whatever technology we wind up using, but some kind of encrypted singular biometric identifier that we can then go forward across the internet on. And that sounds like another dystopian future, I realize, but I don't see how we can avoid that one. Unless we start building these little enclaves, like I said, where everybody is living in a no-tech zone.
I don't think we do avoid it. The question is, like I said, we're not having the social discussions that we need to have about AI. One of them we've talked about incessantly: income. Anybody who thinks that there are going to be the same amount of jobs in 2 years from now, I am willing to take some bets, and I'm willing to put down $1,000 on this, and you pay 10 to 1 on it, though.
I'm willing to take 1,000 of your dollars as well.
Yeah, but tell me that we're not going to have an unemployment problem in 2 to 3 years.
Oh, of course, absolutely, yeah.
But this is this is a great tip I got from when I studied risk analysis. Is if you want to get people to do proper risk analysis, force them to take a bet, and your mind kicks into system 2 and automatically becomes analytical. And also why the bookies are so good for predicting things. Because when we bet money, we get serious about it. That's why I'm saying nobody will put serious money down to say we're going to have lower unemployment in 2 to 3 years. Nobody. So we already have that social problem we're not talking about. The second problem we have is identity and our ability to protect it. And actually, we have more of a Canadian audience. I may lose a couple more American listeners on this one. But if anybody thinks that Elon Musk didn't walk away with all the information on a lot of people.
Oh God, yeah.
I know he's got the stuff on Donald Trump because he talked about it last night. I've got the
Epstein files
on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. Yeah. But the amount of data that he has walked away with and will be used, mark my words, in some way to fuel his AI machine. That's a speculation, but I'm sure because there's been so much data exfiltrated. Now, I'm not saying that Elon Musk is stealing it just so he doesn't come and sue me or anything like that. I'm just saying a lot of data was exfiltrated by Doge and it sits somewhere. And I think the aim was to create a unified file for the government. I think the US government wants that unified file. But why do they want that?
For the
So they
same
can keep
reason,
track
I'm
of
going to
it.
guess that the Chinese government wants data on every citizen in China as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They want that to keep track of you. Governments have been identifying and keeping data on you for control. I'm going to do a Marcel on this since the beginning of time. Do you remember why Jesus was born in Bethlehem? Because the Romans were doing a census, right? And we've been doing that to keep control of the population for millennia. And now they're going to find another way to use that to control the population. And that's that. Now you send me the aluminum foil, I'll make the hat.
Next week on Project Synapse, our favorite conspiracies.
No, but governments have always used the information
Of course,
to control
of
the
course,
population.
of course.
And that's a natural thing to expect. So in the same way we haven't talked about income, we haven't talked about identity. And that, like I said, if we'd started with identity, this would be so much simpler.
Yeah, except that identity is one of those things that gets people riled up faster than almost any other topic you can possibly think of. Why do you, like even things like getting fingerprinted, okay? I'm not fond of the idea of being fingerprinted because it has a connotation of you're a criminal associated with it. We get you fingerprinted when we think you've done something wrong or you've been arrested for something or whatever. Where in reality, it's just a form of biometric identification. And you know what? I personally fingerprinted myself to use my phone.
Yep.
Like, I did that, and I've done it, like, for the last 2 or 3 phones that I've owned. I have given it my fingerprint to be able to get on this thing. So the connotations around identity are obviously a problem, and the fear that's going to be used for something are obviously a problem. But then we really do have to look at the other side, that there should be a way for me to feel certain that when I represent myself on the internet or when I am represented on the internet, it is actually me.
But that's different. And this is what I mean by an intelligent design. Those people, if you introduce a universal government ID, like they have done in several European countries. Estonia has it, for instance, a little population of 1 million or something like that. They have a universal ID. And they've designed it from the ID outward. So now, when you go in Estonia or a place that has a universal ID, actually, if I mention this, I've got to go back up. The lack of understanding of the population of this is just incredible. Most people, when I mention this, or if I write a story on it, I get a whole whack of people saying, I'm not going to have a universal government ID. And yet, if I had a universal ID, I don't need to know it's Marcel. If you're driving, I only need to know that you're authorized to drive.
Yes.
So now, with a proper design, I can say, here's my card. I'm authorized to drive. That's right. And prove it's you. Here, I put my thumbprint on this, or I've held it up to my eye, and it says, it proves that I'm a natural citizen, but I'm not going to tell you who I am yet. And you could design that sort of thing into something that's ubiquitous. So my data is mine, but the instantiation of it that you need is provided to you. That's the reverse of what's happening. Right now, we're cramming all our data into something. Somebody's going to own it all, tie it back to a universal identifier for us, and that's an issue. I'll give you a historical piece of this. Remember, you're old enough to remember before we had social insurance numbers? I think they arrived in the 50s or the 60s.
Well, I arrived in,
to
be clear, I arrived in 1960. So yeah.
Okay, so no, but they're not, we haven't had them forever.
Okay.
And there was a big debate, and when I was first in IT, when I was a little IT guy, we were always taught you can't use the social insurance number as a key for a system because it was against the law. I don't actually know if it was or not, but because there was this whole resentment of this number that the government had that they could identify you with. Now, all of the people came out and said all kinds of nice things like it's never going to be used as a real identifier. It's just for these purposes and all that sort of stuff. Tell that to the people who were customers of Nova Scotia Power. Know to use their social insurance number to determine they have an electrical bill. But It's a very convenient way to tell the difference between Doogie McPhail or Doogie McPhail and Doogie McPhail, one lives in Cape Breton, one lives... That's a perfect identifier. Now, so when they steal the data, which they did from Nova Scotia Power, they took all the social insurance numbers. And guess what they're great for? Fraud. And Revenue Canada is so porous. I'm surprised that there's any data left in there that hasn't been hacked. So that's what I mean about the design is poor, but that's the world we're in. By the way, I've spent a lot of time whining about that.
Yeah.
It would have been better if we designed it from that point out, but we have to get in the same way it would have been better if we'd had good discussions about income. We're going to have those discussions soon, and we're not set up to do that.
Yeah, and I'm with you there, and it's one of the reasons that I use the idea of maybe it's a good thing that this is happening so quickly, because it is going to force the issue in a way that a slow-moving development just doesn't. It's like we can put it off another 5 years or another 10 years or another 20 years or something like that. You know what? You can't put this one off another 20 years because 2 years from now it will have been decided for you. And I think the only question that's left for us, and I'm a huge proponent of universal basic income or a minimum income, but I think that what we're going to have to decide is who we trust to provide that universal identification. And I don't know if it's Sam Altman and his World ID, but let me just ask you this for fun, okay? Right now, you can go to scanning parties for these things, as in they'll have these things and there are places in the States where you can have it shipped so that you can scan you and multiple people and stuff like this. If it showed up in your town, would you have your iris scanned to create a World ID on Sam Altman's?
No, I wouldn't do that. I'm getting more and more reluctant about giving out information.
What do you think I would do? Just out of curiosity.
You would. You'd be good. You'd be going, bring it on, buddy. Yeah. No, that's the issues that I think people are not talking about, but that's okay. We can't change that. The question is, how are we going to respond to that in the world where, face it, it's not a new problem, but I think you put it correctly. It's now accelerated a problem that we may have to think about faster because it's there. That may be the benefit of all of this speed, because Mark Zuckerberg has known everything about us for years.
Oh, yeah.
And has a great deal of information. The old thing of, you remember when it was so quaint to talk about the NSA having information on you, and they'd spy on you, and you'd have to go away and live in Russia because you'd given that away. They don't have to spy on you anymore. They buy it from information brokers.
That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
My wife tells me, how does this know I've got a problem with my back? You either search something or I didn't. You did this? Okay. Do you also know that stores ship their information up to Facebook so that they can tell what you're purchasing? No. This has been ubiquitous. Yeah, but I think if it moves slow, it's a lot like global warming, right?
Yeah.
There's 3 stupid people who think that global warming's not going to happen. And the rest of the people know it's going to happen. A lot of people ignore it because they think, well, it's just going to happen. I can't do anything about it. But it's just because it's advancing so slowly. But now, like I said, what's this whole thing comes to a head in 18 months?
And that is exactly why Dario Amodei went on this interview to sound the alarm about the white-collar bloodbath that we talked about last week. Yep. It's happening, and somebody has to start paying attention. And it is going to happen whether we pay attention or not. But I think hiding... Was it you who made the joke about digging the hole and putting your head in? I think that we can't do that. Like, we have to accept that it's happening. And in some way, and maybe this is the part where it's the most difficult of all, in some way embrace it, but embrace it intelligently. And I think embracing something like this can be damn scary. But if you ignore it at your peril. Anyway, Sam, bring the orb and scan me.
Yeah, scan me. So this was a wild and outrageous discussion. Next week, what I'd like to do, if we can, is I'd like to go back to a couple of practical things and maybe just do a walk through some of these apps. And I think we'll do it so we can actually share screens. And we'll have to watch it how we do it, because we still have an audio audience that's big, but if people did want to actually see what was happening, they could actually watch that. And we'll start that with this show, because John will appear. Actually,
Good morning, gentlemen. It's good to be back here for another episode of Project Synapse. You know, I just live for these discussions, right?
if you're watching this, you don't know that John wasn't going to appear, or maybe you do, I forget. But he will appear in this episode on YouTube, and you'll hear his voice. The voice is scary, I have to say that. Of, like, when I heard the clone you made of John, with his permission, of course, when I heard that clone, I went, first of all, how did you get that? And second of all, because most of the places require that you give permission to use the voice. So you.
But I do. I got permission from him on. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. In addition to this next week, since we want to talk about this, I will give you the secret. So I'm gonna let you ponder it for a week, and I will tell you exactly how I did it.
Okay, so Marcel's secrets of identity theft will be...
No, not theft. Borrowing. Identity borrowing.
Sorry. Identity borrowing. Yes, he's identity borrowing. We'll do that next week for sure. But the thing that I wanted to point out just as we wrap this is the voice is now scary. That's John's voice.
Yeah.
And there's the video part of it. It's, if you didn't know him really well, it would fool.
I told John that if I had more frames to work with, I took a single screenshot from last week. If I had more frames and more time, I could have really nailed this one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So your identity is all your base are belong to us. That's
Go look that one up.
yeah. Good stuff. Marcel, thank you very much. This is great. Live long
and prosper.
And we'll do this again next week.
And bye, John.
Bye, John. Bye, John boy.
It's great to be here with you guys. I'd like to thank Marcel for bringing out my best side. I didn't realize I looked this good.